Welcome everybody to our session on the angels of God. This is being recorded for christadelphianvideos.org, and my name is Ron Cowie from South Australia. We now come on to session 10, which is the angels in action, as part of our consideration of the angels of God, those that stand by. Remember, we're looking at this third section of the reasons we study the angels to appreciate how God sends them to work in our lives. We noted in our last study there are many ways the angels actually work with us, and it's all about sealing the servants of God. It's about impressing divine thinking. It's about character building. It's about developing saints fit for eternity. We noted last time the incident of Rebecca, the bride that was from afar, being called to come and join the family of Abraham, and of course a great type there of our calling, the calling of the Gentiles. What I want you to notice, though, from the story of Rebecca is the immediate response to prayer. Eliezer, being a faithful member of Abraham's household, prayed for a sign that a woman would come out and actually offer to water him and his camels. And the record is quite remarkable. While he's actually still praying, it came to pass before he had done speaking that, behold, Rebecca came out. Now that, when you think about it, is quite remarkable, because he hadn't even finished the prayer and she was there. And you can imagine, can't you, her coming to the well and finding a whole string of camels, a man unable to get water out, and on his face praying to his God that a woman might come and actually say certain words. And she actually says those exact words. And it just gives you some idea that the anticipation of the angel about the prayer was there. And that is something that we've really struggled with. We really have a problem understanding God's foreknowledge, because it's so unfamiliar to our human experience. But in the case of God, he knows those things before. He knew the character of the girl, that she would see this man in need of water, and that she was a person who would make that offer. And so the prayer was answered even before he'd finished offering it. You find the same thing in the book of Daniel. Daniel, having received visions, trying to get information while I was speaking and praying. While I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel touched me and said, "Look, Daniel, the beginning of your supplications, the command came forth." And Gabriel had been dispatched by Michael to come to Daniel. "I'm come to show you, for you are greatly beloved." So again, the angels will increase our understanding. If we have the desire to understand, angels are sent forth to make sure that we do understand. And again, you get this great anticipation of the angels to be there in answer to those prayers, the immediate response to prayer. There are occasions where the angels do actually deliver people from evil. And you know the case of Daniel in the lion's den. The king hoped that the God of Daniel would deliver him, because Daniel had been so consistent in his service. And of course, he was right in that estimation. And Daniel could say, when the great pit was opened, "My God has sent his angel and has shut the lion's mouth. They have not hurt me." And that happened because he believed in his God. So there are times when people are rescued, where people are saved by miracles. We're going to see later on Daniel's friends saved by an angel in the fiery furnace. But there are many times when God doesn't intervene. So again, whatever God's will is, will be done. On this occasion, the angel came and delivered Daniel. Just going back to this particular thing about the fast angelic response, just notice that again, while I was speaking and praying, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel touched me. And we can be assured, brethren and sisters and young people and friends, that God's angels still go to work when we are very keen to understand the deeper things of God's revelations. Now, this is Daniel 10, verse 11 and 12, a second occasion when the angel came to him. Well, I want you to notice in this the connection, the emotional response of the angel. He said to me, "Daniel, O man greatly beloved." This was a time when Israel had been destroyed by the Assyrians and Babylonians. They had been scattered, in the case of the northern tribes, to many parts of the earth. The kingdom of Judah had been destroyed, and they had been taken to Babylon for captivity. So here is Daniel in captivity. And you think about it, there's no real worship back in Jerusalem. The remnant had gone down to Egypt, and they were destroyed there later by Nebuchadnezzar. So there were very few people in Israel that were keeping the ways of God. What you did have was Daniel and Ezekiel leading those who were in Babylon. But to Daniel, the angel's words were, "You're a man greatly beloved." That is not just God's opinion, that is the opinion of the angels. Because who else in the world at this stage could the angels work with so directly as they did with Daniel and with Ezekiel? Man greatly beloved. Understand the words I speak unto thee, for I am now sent to you. And when he'd spoken these words, I stood trembling, and he said unto me, "Fear not, Daniel. From the first day you set your heart to understand, and chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words." And Gabriel was twice dispatched by Michael. Gabriel, make this man to understand. So there's a great desire amongst the angels that we should increase our understanding and knowledge of things divine, of the word of God, and of the visions that God has concealed for his servants in this great book. So Daniel received great attention from the angels and much love from the angels for his interest in these things. This is a comment from Brother Roberts and Brother Walker's book, The Ministry of the Prophets. And commenting on the times of Daniel, it says this: "Could we but penetrate the invisible with our faithful scrutiny, we should see the angels of God at work just as much now as in the days of Daniel and the Persian kings." And when you go through the Bible, there are periods of intense angelic activity in the lives of the patriarchs as God sets up his nation. There's a lot of activity in the days of the Babylonian captivity. A number of books were written in that time. Many angelic visitations and visions were given in that time, because again, Israel was on the point of oblivion, and God's angels were very much at work to preserve them. Then you have another outburst around the time of the coming of Christ into the world, and then a final outburst in the time of the apostles. So the angels are openly revealed at certain times, but they're always working there in the background. And the comment is, there is progress, though there is silence. But the angels of God are just as much at work today as they ever were. Well, Daniel's friends are another great example of the angels working with those who have a godly conscience. And we know what they were commanded to do. That was to worship the Babylonian idol, all of gold. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar's determination to have a never-ending kingdom. But it was, of course, a case where everybody else bowed down and they were left standing on their feet. And that's a good example of what we have to do sometimes for a godly conscience. But I want you to notice their speech to the king, which has a great attitude to God's providence. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we were not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. So there is faith, there is confidence from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king." There again is an expression of hope. But if he doesn't, and there is the reality check. Sometimes we have to accept God has a different purpose for us. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So we don't change our principles because of a dire situation or a dire threat. We don't know whether God will deliver us from some situations, but we do the right thing. We do what God has said. We follow his commandments. We don't worship idols, and we leave it in God's hands. And there was the correct attitude to the providence of God. Always do that which is right, obey the commandments, and God will do his will, whatever happens. There were many servants of God that actually were in a similar situation and threat for their life. Think of our brethren and sisters who were savaged by lions in the days of Nero. I'm sure many of them offered very similar prayers, but in their case, God did not choose to deliver them. You know, God can see a far greater and more eternal reward for them than what they would have gone through in the rest of their lives. And their martyrdom is something that almost guarantees their entry to the kingdom. So here it is. You know, the correct attitude to providence. God will, we hope he will, we think he will, but if he doesn't, then it's not going to change our view on how we behave and what we obey of the commandments of God. Well, God did answer their prayer. The king looked into and said, "Did we not see 3 men cast bound into the fire?" "Oh, yes, we did, O king. But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods," as it should be correctly rendered. A son of the gods. And you'll find that in almost every other translation. This, I think, is the ESV. It's not a son of God as the AV has. It's the son of the gods. So everyone recognized that that fourth person that was protecting them with an aura of safety in that hot fire was actually an angel. And again, you get a great impression that angels can protect when they choose to do so. And the men came out, not even with the smell of fire upon them. And yet all of those who had thrown them in were actually torched as they got near that fire. Later on, King Nebuchadnezzar would actually burn 2 false prophets. And you read that in Jeremiah 29, that 2 false prophets in Babylon were actually roasted by Nebuchadnezzar and were not delivered. So again, the angels can intervene and they cannot intervene. When you go through the prophets, you find a number of times the angels actually get personally involved. And I used to always read these words and just think about it was something that happened in a vision, or it was something that actually a hand came down through the clouds. I could never really visualize until I properly understood God's manifestation. And when you realize that the Yahweh angel is actually there with the prophet, it makes so much more sense. Then Yahweh put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And Yahweh said unto me, Behold, I put my words in thy mouth. And here was the commissioning of Jeremiah by a direct touch upon his lips from the hand of Yahweh. In Ezekiel 2 verse 9, Ezekiel sees a book. A hand was sent to me and the roll of a book was therein. So he just saw a hand with a scroll in it. So again, the angel only let Ezekiel see as much as he wanted him to see. And it was a hand holding a scroll. And of course, he was to eat that scroll. In Daniel chapter 5, verse 5, the writing on the wall with the king Belshazzar, there was a writing, a hand that wrote on the wall. So again, only the part of the hand that wrote was seen. And again, the angels being able to hold them with the eyes of men only wished the hand to be seen. And the hand stayed there until it was removed and the words became obvious. Isaiah 6 had a similar commission to Jeremiah. He took a coal from the altar, he laid it on my mouth and said, Lo, this has touched thy lips. Thine iniquity is taken away and thy sin purged. And so he was no longer a man of unclean lips. He could now speak the words of God. But again, there was this direct touch, this direct involvement of the angels with the prophets of God, or with other people just where a part of a hand appeared. But again, that's the work of the angels on the earth, performing the will of God. Well, when we come to the case of the rebuilding of the temple, some 70 years later, they went back under the decree of Cyrus, and they began to rebuild the temple of God in Jerusalem. The work was opposed by the Arabs and the Samaritans, and they were determined to try and stop this work, and they tried to do it by deceit, by threats, and then by writing letters to the kings of Persia to try and have the work stopped. And we're told in the record that no matter what the enemies and the Samaritans tried to do, the angels made sure that it did not succeed. And it says this in Ezra chapter 5, verse 5, but the eye of their God, there is the eyes of the angels everywhere in the earth performing the will of God. The eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, that they could not cause them to cease, till the matter came to Darius, and then they returned by letter concerning this matter. And we know what happened when Darius searched out the decree of Cyrus. He found that it was so, that they had the authority to build that temple. And then, of course, what happened was that the decree came back from Persia that not only should they leave the building alone, but they had to pay for it. And their taxes were going to pay for the temple in Jerusalem. And there was a classic case of the eye of God being upon the builders. And we said in 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9, to Asa, the eyes of God run to and fro through the whole earth to show themselves strong on behalf of those whose heart is perfect toward him. So again, there's this the eyes of God, the hands of God, this work of the angels working with God's people in the earth. Well, again, just quoting Zechariah chapter 4, just to get this impression of all these things that we've been talking about coming together. This again was in the temple rebuilding. They were being opposed, but God is reassuring Zerubbabel, the governor, that he would finish the work of building that house. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall finish it. And when it happens, you shall know that Yahweh of armies has sent me unto you. And there again is that promise of the individual angel coming to Zerubbabel to work with him on the great work he'd undertaken. Well, again, Zechariah 6, verse 15, you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me unto you. I just want to just keep putting that in front of you, because that's going to be our experience. When we get to the kingdom and hopefully be given immortality, only then will we appreciate just how much God has done with us and for us. Brother Roberts puts it this way. Though God is with his children, he looks to them to arrange their affairs with discretion, as testified in all the Proverbs of Solomon. Human action is the basis for divine supervision. In its absence, there is nothing for the angels to work on. And that's the lesson we must take away from this series about the angels working in our lives. Human action is the basis for divine supervision. Obeying the commandments, doing the will of God, preaching the word, looking after brethren and sisters are all the things that God requires of us. And no matter what circumstance in life seems to go wrong, we keep doing what God has said needs to be done. The angels then can work behind the scenes very effectively with us.